Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of CRO Better. I'm excited to have my friend Sangram on for this episode of CRO Better. Sangram, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Excited for this. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I hope I can add value to your audience today.
I think you're selling yourself short. So for those that may not know who you are, Sangram, maybe you and I were even just talking about right before we recorded, but the career arc that you've had is pretty interesting as it relates to both on the software side as an author, community member, and now building a really great company and go-to-market partners. But I think it'd be a great opportunity just to share a little bit with our folks around how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just career-wise, well, maybe personal. Wife, 20-year marriage, and two kids. There's a lot of activities going on. Weekends are actually harder than weekdays, which is something that you only learn when you have kids that are old enough, and the activities are a lot more than what you want to chew on, and then you feel like entrepreneurship is easy than the
Yes.
weekend parenting sometimes. But that's on the personal side. On the professional side, I really had an incredibly amazing break almost, I would say, by the opportunity to run marketing at Pardot. And that got acquired by Exact Target. We were a $10 million company, got acquired for about 95, so $100 million company. And then 6 months later, Brendan, as you know, Exact Target got acquired by Salesforce for 2.7 billion. And so I just stayed. A lot of people jumped the ship and they're like, well, we're not going to be the big part of this big thing and whatnot. We were like, I actually stayed on because I wanted to get an MBA at Salesforce and learn a lot. And I learned so much. We can dig into that in a minute if you want. And then actually, I learned a lot about product marketing and RevOps at Salesforce. So we can dig into that if you want. And then I got an opportunity to be a co-founder with Eric Spett and Eric Vass at a company called Terminus we built here in Atlanta. We grew. We had a PE acquisition, and then again a reacquisition a few months ago by a company called Demand Science. So I've just loved the journey that I've been on.
Yeah, it's been for those that are in the Atlanta market like me. It's there are some like heroes in the software space, and you were certainly in that category. So thanks for leading the way for this community. We really do appreciate it. And okay, so Sangram, since Terminus, you have written a book. You started another company. Help our community rather know kind of what you're doing now. I think it'd be a helpful kind of
Yeah.
segue into our topic for today.
Yeah. I think after building two software companies and having exit, I feel like I got to do that, and then that's incredible. I didn't want to do another software company, and Brian Brown, who is my co-author on the last book, Move, which became a Wall Street Journal bestseller, we both just were like, what do we enjoy? We had to have this self-reflective thought and weeks of just figuring out what gets us out of the bed now that we have had this kind of success. And it wasn't making more money, it wasn't building another like $1 billion business or anything like that. It was literally, we feel incredibly blessed that we love to create frameworks, we love to distill ideas into it, we love to build community around it, we love to write books and evangelize ideas through that. And that literally is, if I go back and look at it, and most people who know me would say that, man, that's actually what you did. You ended up building a software company, but it wasn't what you were doing. You actually were evangelizing the whole time. As a matter of fact, my title at Terminus ended up becoming the chief evangelist because of the way we just perceive the world. So with go-to-market partners, we write a research note every Monday called GTM Monday. There are over 175,000 people read it now, so people can look it up. And we go deep in every single week on GTM, all different areas, from total relevant market to RevOps. We just create and do so much advisory work around it that allows us to learn what it is. People come to us with problems solving for their go-to-market, and we literally have a very clear way to go through those problems using the 8-question go-to-market operating system, and that's our focus for the next few years.
Yeah, for those that aren't familiar, that the idea of flipping the funnel when we talk about the chief evangelist and what Sangram was up to, I mean that's really I'll give you credit for that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I will. And then, I am a subscriber of the weekly newsletter. And in fact, that's going to be the topic for today. And I really love kind of how you framed it as it relates to, hey, how do we take the lessons that I've learned, that we've learned, and then allow and empower others to have that same experience? And so I think so often, we were even talking about it in the, when we were prepping, it's just this idea of microwaving success as opposed to like actually being in seat, taking those lessons and then giving it back to the community. So I appreciate your willingness to really create that type of community for others to learn and grow and to move faster. And in fact, that's why we have CRO Better. It's this idea of a play on, yes, HubSpot's grow better, but how do we empower that go-to-market owner who's really been given this new playbook that they don't necessarily know, and they're trying to learn how to be successful in this new era that we're a part of. And so learning from you is great. And let's move into kind of, as you mentioned in this newsletter, you had one, I think it was last week or the week before, that I thought was really relevant to our audience, which got into the CEO's Guide to RevOps, which of course is near and dear to my heart for what we do, but I think it's helpful to hear from a third party as it relates to not only what it is, but the impact it can have on the organization. So I guess for foundation setting, for those that may not be familiar with it, how would you define it? And then why would you say it's so important for a B2B company to be investing in this concept?
Yeah. So I'll take a step back for people to recognize the depth of it. Going back to Salesforce and understanding RevOps and product marketing, I think Salesforce had it. They may not have called it at that time RevOps, but that literally was the way they ran each one of their cloud. I mean, most people don't recognize every cloud is a whole business in it, like the sales cloud, the marketing cloud, and all of those things, right? That's an example. And I know, knowing HubSpot, I've spent so much time at Inbound and so much time with Yamini and Brian and Dharmesh and all of those folks. They were actually one of the first investors in Terminus in the early days. So knowing them, and it's been really, really fun. Even in the book Move, which we published in 2021, one of the 6 truths was RevOps. And at that time, RevOps even wasn't a term totally used, but we could start seeing that this should be. I'll share the problem with how people try to solve it and then get to the actual definition of it. I think at some point or the other, most companies reach a point where they go from a problem market fit to a product market fit. And eventually where they want to go is platform market fit. And as the name suggests, it's each of these stages requires you to work and operate in a different mindset. So in a problem market fit, which is early stage or company that hasn't really figured out exactly how and who their persona is and how they're going to sell over and over again the same thing to same people, we're all looking for a pulse and people to buy. And when you're able to do it, you start looking for patterns in it. At that stage, you actually don't need RevOps. What you need is almost siloed teams. They're just going and figuring out whatever it takes to win. So at that time, you don't even need operations in general. You just need people to do their job as much as quickly as possible, as fast as possible. As you get into product market fit, which is really when you start having a stride, if you will, around selling to the same market, the same segment over and over again. Now you start hiring teams, and now you need a customer success team, for example, and all those things. Now you're actually having a conversation like, all right, who are my best customers? That's when RevOps starts becoming really interesting, because at this point, most likely you have somebody in marketing doing operations, somebody in sales doing some operation work, and you're like, well, how does this all relate? But even at that time, a lot of times companies have team meetings where they're having this conversation of who moved my cheese, which is literally saying I had this number and somebody else has that other number, and whose numbers is right and who updated all of that. And that's when I think you enter RevOps. That's the stage. If you find yourself in meetings and conversations where people are spending the first 20 minutes of your executive meeting talking about who moved my cheese, that's your telltale sign to say you need a unified group of people or one person who actually says, wait, I'm going to be the one pulling these numbers together so that we can have a more qualified conversation in this team. That's the literal need and definition I believe most companies need to think about when they think about RevOps.
I like that. So just to play that back, it sounds like they're different stages of a company journey, and you talked a little bit about there's problem market fit and then product market fit, and the problem is really that's more into like, hey, we think about like force and friction, and it's kind of like
Yeah.
this idea of that's really just put force into the business and get revenue in the door. And then as you have, okay, based off of that revenue, now I have a clear understanding of what my product is, what my market is for that. To your point about product market fit, that's when you start getting that data. And once you have that data, it's like, how do we drive that alignment, ultimately reducing the friction to ensure that we continue to grow?
Yeah. And the reality is most organizations, this happened, and this is my own personal experience at Terminus. We had an individual, her name is Mallory Lee, phenomenal. At I think we were right about 25 million in revenue or so. And I would be in these meetings all the time, and we were like spending this time looking at spreadsheets, looking at all of these things, 5, 10, 20 minutes, just talking about, well, what cohort are we talking about? The salesperson had a bias towards something, marketers have all this. We hired Mallory Lee, and she came in, and Brendan, I kid you not, that day when she sat in the meeting and she said, and she pulled together called as the go-to-market dashboard. And that was the first time I got a taste of like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
this is interesting. None of the people are required to bring their numbers. She, which is completely independent, reporting to the CEO, is bringing in a point of view and literally saying things like, I don't think we need have more leads. What we need is actually better enablement because we have a lot of pipeline. We're not converting as fast. So she was able to speak into unbiased perspective and saying, here's what we need to do, as opposed to a marketing person trying to jockey for their own thing, unknowingly or knowingly, it doesn't matter. It's just human nature. You are going to protect what you have. Same thing on the same. So for the first time, Brendan, I saw my eyes opened up. This is what led to actually the Move book, and there's a whole chapter on it because I saw it firsthand. It changed the entire composition, the
Yep.
outcome, the depth at which we were actually having this conversation. And the most important part, this is something that I'll never forget. That day, I felt like every single person had to become a business leader as opposed to a CMO, a CRO, and all that stuff. They had to become a business leader, having their information to like, well, how do we solve business problems? And that to me was game changer for us as a business.
Yeah, when you say that story, it reminds me a similar experience. I was at QA Symphony, and it's Atlanta-based software company that got merged with Tricentis and just got acquired, actually about 6 months ago. And I remember Ellen Kinley, she came in. We were probably a little bit earlier than where you guys were. I think we were about 10 to 15 million. And Jordan Racky, who was
Yeah.
the CRO at the time, was like, we're bringing in Ellen, and she's going to play this function. It wasn't called RevOps, similar to what you're describing. It was actually more of like a sales ops type function. But this idea of having somebody that was a source of truth from a data perspective to give like unbiased insights was incredibly valuable. I was very skeptical, and then I became very much a believer. And now she's like the chief transformation officer at Key Factor, which is over $1 billion company from a value perspective. So you said something interesting though when you talk about Mallory. You mentioned that she started joining the executive team meetings, and then she was reporting into the CEO. That's a interesting comment, and I want to unpack that a little bit further if we can. So it sounds like what you're advocating for, maybe from your experience, is it sounds like RevOps needs to have a seat at the table from a leadership perspective, and then who does that person report into? I think that'd be a good place to transition.
Yeah. First and foremost, if the RevOps becomes a glorified sales ops role, we have achieved nothing. That's the big challenge. Same thing as CRO. If the CRO only has sales reporting into them, then they are not a chief revenue officer. We have achieved nothing. Same thing if we have said that we have a chief go-to-market officer, as some people are calling some new roles, because we all need a new shiny object every so often, and they only have marketing report into them, they have achieved nothing. So the RevOps role has to be independent. It has to be plugged in. Typically, what we are advocating for now, as you mature from a product market fit to platform market fit, if you're moving on that journey, if that's the organization that you are part of right now, and you're hiring or have a RevOps person, they most likely should have a sales ops person that could be in the sales team, marketing ops person that could have had dotted line to marketing team and working with them day in and day out, but they all report into this RevOps person, and the RevOps person has to be reporting to someone completely independent of the revenue lines. Probably a CFO or a COO or a president or a CEO, depending on the size of the company, because those roles are independent of trying to figure out how do I protect a kingdom. They're actually trying to figure out what is the right thing for the business each and every day. If that doesn't happen, Brendan, I've seen this time and time again, they will end up becoming glorified revenue ops, which actually means their job becomes connecting two different technologies over there, and that becomes a RevOps role, or being the spreadsheet jockey and say, hey, give me this, give me that from one of the folks. And it really does not have a strategic view. So if you want a strategic RevOps leader and a role to play, then that individual has to be the person independent of these roles. And here's the second thing I would say, and we wrote that about book. I also believe that it's the second most important role in the company outside of the CEO, because I believe CEO owns go-to-market. We have talked about that at length in many other places. The second most important role in the company, I've always thought about that because I'm a marketer. I'm like, oh, marketing, the CMO, and you know, what is the second most important role? And the more I think about it, I believe the second most important role in the business is the RevOps person. And here's why. They are the only person in the company outside of the CEO who has vested interest in the business as a whole, not as a function, but as an entire business. So for example, they are the only one who could make comments like, we don't need to spend more on marketing, without worrying about jobs or what's wrong or what's right or having any bias towards it. They're the only people who could look at it and say, you know what, this particular cohort is performing better than this. It's like the Moneyball guy, right? Like the guy who only is looking at the numbers, has no emotions in it. And it's for a very important reason, because if you make emotional decisions on the most strategic areas of your business, you are going to end up making irrational decisions. In order to build a business, this is a hard truth to follow. You have to look at numbers very, very objectively and almost be devoid of that. So if that person reports into any of these functions, it's impossible for them to make those strategic commentary that will help the CEO or the executive team make business decisions.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with a lot of what you're saying. It's funny because we actually used the Billy Bean Moneyball for a whole RevOps session we did for HubSpot because of what you're just describing. I think we typically look at go-to-market as an art, and it's becoming more and more of a science because of that data. One thing that you mentioned that I think would be helpful for the audience to make sure they're aware of. So we talk about problem market fit, product market fit, and you just mentioned platform.
Yeah.
What are the inflection points that would say, hey, we are now in platform? Because I think that's an important distinction for our audience when you think about that RevOps function to your not function. Let's be careful words we use, but who that reports into. So I think that'd be helpful just to define platform real fast.
And the platform market fit, I remember, I'll give you a quick note on that one. Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm, we just had another session with him last week. And he wrote a great quote for the book, because he said, man, that is literally the Crossing the Chasm, the bowling pin, if anybody remember his books, and then Zone to Win. And that literally, in a way, codifies problem, product, platform in the book. And we use that all the time with our clients. And the reason is this, Brandon. If you understand what stage of the business you're in and get aligned as an executive team, you actually can make better decisions, hands down. So for example, when you are in a product market fit, what defines and signifies that is you have a single product that just works time and time again. And now the most you can do with that is maybe increase distribution channels, maybe go to different markets and segments, maybe go to different personas and try to sell the same thing. That's a classic definition of product market fit. Most companies around 10 to 50 million or so can stay in a product market fit and be incredible. But it's really hard to grow beyond that, because all you could do is get great customers and maybe retain those customers, and that's phenomenal. You can never do what we call the most important metric in business, which is NRR, net revenue retention, the single most important metric for any health of the business. I wish somebody would have told me this like 10 years ago when we were building Terminus. never looked at it. We were all in this get net new customer, get net new customer. But if you are at an NRR of 120%, and you know this because in 5 years you will double your revenue without even adding a single
Right.
new customer. Like that math is like mind blowing. If people just go back, no new customer, 5 years, double your revenue, 120% NRR. It's insane to think about it. So that's the inflection point from going from product to platform, is when you can add more than one product, and therefore now you can sell to the existing base new things. So the existing base is now buying more things from you. Therefore, not only your retention goes, but you start to expand within the existing customer base. That's when you need cohort level analysis. That's when RevOps becomes incredibly valuable, because you're no longer looking at how much revenue are we going to get from the net new customers. Actually, that doesn't matter. You actually look at 80, 60, 70, 80% of the revenue is going to come from your existing customer base. And now the analysis starts happening around cohorts, not of net new customers, but the existing customers, and saying which one of these customer cohorts is now going to give us the next 10 million or 20 million or 50 million. I saw that, at Salesforce and all of these companies live, and that's when I understood, oh, how does a $10 billion company make decisions, right? And how can they forecast revenue to such a T, year after year after year? How has HubSpot been able to do that? I was listening to the earnings call and all of it. The reason is because they have this incredible grasp through revenue operations in some way, shape, or form to really look at, hey, we already know 90% of the business revenue is going to come. We don't have to worry about that. If you do a little bit this thing, we'll get another 10, 15%. Now the whole thesis and the whole conversation is about how do we get another 15% on top of it? And that's all they focus on as a business. To me, that's the classic definition of a platform market fit, where you can expand more than one product. We can then look at different ways to grow in the business. And it's a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah, I think to summarize that, I think there's this idea that growth begets complexity. And as you continue to mature, whether it's moving into other regions, other service lines, or just focusing on your existing base, there's inherent complexity with that. And if you don't have somebody that's owning that data model to ensure not only alignment, but visibility and coordination, you're in a world of hurt. And you mentioned HubSpot. Actually, the last episode of our podcast, we had John Dick, who's the SVP of Customer Success.
Love that guy.
And just listening to his perspective on how they think about retention from a CS perspective. And one of the things we talked about is there's this paradigm shift where there are a few things to call out. If you think about their flywheel, they talk a lot delight. Now they're talking a lot about deliver, and this idea that we have to consistently deliver. And so the CS team is focusing really on usage and adoption, and like that is the function of that CS team. They incentivize them on customer dollar retention, which is really around downgrades and cancels as opposed to expansion. And then he also talks a lot about this idea of the burden is actually on the vendor. In this example would be HubSpot. Like we have to make sure that the cost to change tools has never been higher. So having that CS team very focused on that component and allowing sales, and to your point, RevOps, to really own anything around cross-sell or expansion is the best way that they've found to be successful of, hey, if we delight the customer and we have a product-led growth, it will ultimately lead to expansion. But I want to go into this idea, the last topic here of what you were just describing is, hey, historically in the old playbook, there was an acquisition obsession, understandably so, especially in those early days. But as you just described in that platform season of growth, there's this idea of how do we actually focus on not just new customers, but balance that with our existing customers. Maybe even, I want to go so far as to say, I know you talked a little bit about retention as a new acquisition, but like how does RevOps on that right side of the bow tie, if you will, once they become a customer and that platform phase, what is their role and what should they be prioritizing?
For specifically for a business, when you are at a platform market fit or going in that direction, and the RevOps absolutely becomes critical. I don't know a single company, they may not call it RevOps, but I don't know a single company who's ushering into a platform market fit business and they don't have a centralized way of looking at all of this stuff, because that literally becomes the way you grow your business. The area where it becomes complicated and people, this is where complexity really needs to be on the flip side of all of this, is we all know simplicity scales and complexity fails. Like that's a classic way of looking at most things. The businesses that are big actually are not more complex. They have figured out how to scale the simplified version of it. So I'll give you an example of this. When I was at Pardot, we had two different CRMs that we were integrating with. And one of the CRM we were integrating with, that CRM integration was costing a lot more money because there were only 5 customers on it. And we needed almost 10 engineers to fix those things because it was a complicated CRM integration. Whereas the other CRM integration that we had, 95% of our customers, they never said anything. They were all happy. There were no problems there. But we were spending almost 80% of our firepower on fixing for these 5. And it took us a while to recognize, oh my gosh, we are complicating our business in the name of creating better distribution or more platform. No, we didn't need to do that. We were too early to make that jump. So people start making jumps and testing things. There's nothing wrong with testing, but you can start complicating your business when you don't know exactly where we are growing. So the same way happens when you're in a platform market fit. The role of RevOps at that stage is to simplify the business, not complicate the business. And that's why somebody needs to be looking at the business all the time and saying, okay, should we be doing more of this, or should we stop and do more of that, or should we play A/B test on it and try and do new things because we can see that this thing is gonna cap out at some point? Those are the decisions that somebody just needs to sit and do it.
Yeah.
Sales will be too busy working on the now, right now. Marketing is too far off to looking at the future and do it. RevOps are likely the people who are almost there where they're like, I can see where we're going to end up in this quarter. Let me look at just the next 2 quarters. So they're literally just 2 steps ahead, but not too far ahead. So that combination is so important. Imagine a business where you have an executive team that can look in the future 5 years from now and starting to look at that thing, team working on whatever is needed right now, but also a team like RevOps that is in the middle, that is constantly telling, hey, here's the red flags, here's the green flags, let's go here. That is so important. It's like a relay race. They're always passing on to make sure that the right person is in the right place, so we know if you should run too fast or too slow or whatever needs to happen in that. There is no better role than RevOps. I wish more companies would take the time to evaluate what stage of the business they are in so they can actually invest in the most important role in the business.
Yeah, it's kind of we talk about the rise of the strategic tactician, and what you were just describing is they really serves that translator. How do you synthesize the data to simplify it and give the story so that that CEO in the example earlier is able to make the right decision since they own go to market. Now, kind of last question for you on this topic is we talk about the CEO owns go to market. RevOps is the second most important role. There's also seasons of a company, but why do you, from your perspective, why do you see CEOs not investing in it? And then if they're not, what is the next step they should consider taking?
Well, most CEOs, if you come from a sales background, I think there's a different types of CEOs, and I think this is where it kind of breaks down. I've seen in my experience the companies that we advise, when we get them to think about this and we help them think about dashboards and so that they can make transformational changes. That's all we help them do. And the most times when we get to it, a CEO that comes from a product background or a finance background, they immediately get the point of RevOps because they're like, I don't know enough. I need help. Like that's more of a humbling point of view. If a CEO comes from a sales background or a marketing background, those are the people who are like, I think I know it. I know what I need, and they're looking at it only from one direction. That's where we see the issue in most companies. So it really does depend upon what background did the CEO have to understand the need for it. So that's one. The other part that we see is that stops people from investing it because they just don't know what stage they're in. A lot of times companies in problem market fit could start acting like they have a product, and we will have to tell them, no, no, you have a feature. You don't even have a product.
Right.
You are selling a feature. Like, get this feature working and selling right now. But they are too far ahead thinking about building a platform. So they're overly subscribing to lots of other things that they don't need, and then they fail because they're over invested in it. So a lot of times the CEOs just don't know. They're plainly unaware of what stage of business they are in, either overly pessimist or overly optimistic. As a result of it, the RevOps role doesn't make a lot of sense to them because they just don't know what stage they're in. So those are the two reasons I see very often. Either they're not, they just they're if they come from a sales operations or marketing background, they might think they know it all and they don't need a whole lot of things. And they just know, you run this, marketing give me leads, sales keep the customers, and they just have that very myopic view of these things. Or they're fully thinking about this from a perspective of like, well, if I don't know what stage I'm in, I'm going to try different things or just not do certain things that are really, really important for them to grow.
Yeah, I think it's I like that perspective in terms of the background of the CEO and then the season of the company, because that will ultimately inform how you perceive it, but ultimately the value that's created. The only other thing I would add that we've seen is it also, like, the industry is pretty interesting, where if you're more in like a laggard industry, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but think like the manufacturing, supply chain, professional services, there's been a huge strong there's been a barrier to entry around education, and what
Mm.
we're now seeing is like that learning curve or adoption curve has shrunk to where they're saying, holy cow, like, now that I can see that the CRM is that important, if I had somebody that owned that and could give me the insights to drive that kind of scientific element, like, there's now this embracing of it, which is a really exciting trend for us to see.
Yeah.
Well, thinking as we wrap up, I just mentioned trends, and you're at the forefront of trends and thinking about go to market. What's something you're thinking about, or something you're seeing that has you excited as we enter FY25?
Man, this might be the longest episode that didn't have AI anywhere dropped in it. So I hopefully people can give us kudos for that, because that would have been easy bait to jump in. But of course, I do believe, and I've said that, like, AI is the new internet, so everybody needs to just get on it and figure out. I typically spend almost 30 minutes to an hour each day learning and becoming a student of how do you make your execution better as an AI. So I would say, doesn't matter what your role is. This is not something you say, hey, go figure it out. This is something actually you, at whatever role you're in the organizations, just have to invest in it, because it's evolving and changing so much. The second thing I would say is what's not changing. I think people are not spending enough time on things that are not changing. They should spend more time on things that will never change. For example, customers would never ever say, give me things slower, give me things at a higher price, make things complex, like make the UI hard to understand. They would never ever ask for those. I think we are too focused on what's changing and not enough on not changing. And I think companies would do better if they align on the first principles that ultimately drive most businesses, and use all the different areas of it. So I'm spending way more time on figuring out what the first principles are, and because we do transformation advisory, our work actually started to become even more valuable, because what you cannot and shouldn't expect AI to do for you is the strategy, not, to figure out the elements that connects the dot. That's still always going to be part of what humans need to do, and you should absolutely use AI to execute at a much faster pace. And the last thing I would say that I'm getting super excited about, which has literally been unbelievable, which is this idea of rise of service as a software. For the most part of my career and everything, as you said, and all of us, we have seen how software actually creates the multiples. But as I said, Terminus got acquired by Demand Science, which is a managed service agency. I would have never thought in my life that would happen. And the more I've spent time on it, I'm looking at like, whoa, there are softwares that are struggling to have customers pay $10,000 a year. Like, they're struggling to get $10,000 a year subscription, whereas services are able to very easily get 10, 20, 30,000 a month in order to do what they need to do. And the difference is people are no longer saying, I don't need to train 100 people on my team. I need experts who know what they're doing. I don't want to invest in software. I want to invest in solutions. So if they can have subscriptions to whatever tools they need, they figure it out. I need results. I need outcomes. I don't need outputs. So that has been really, really interesting. So we're spending a lot of time looking at services that are turning as services as software businesses, where companies are no longer interested in a lot of software. They're interested in actual results and services. So that has been a really big shift in the marketplace.
Yeah, I like that perspective, and that kind of gets into we were talking earlier with John Dick around the idea of deliver. It's not just delight, it's deliver, which gets into I need to see the outcomes, and how that gets done is to be determined. And I like the take there. And to the first 2 points around AI, and then like, let's not, kind of first principles mindset of let's not forget the things that don't change. Like, that's everything we're going to be talking about Southbound. And
Yeah.
so that's our event we'll be having in May in Atlanta. I think hopefully you'll be there, Sangram. But it really gets into the idea of, hey, AI is not the solution; it's a tool, and we can't forget the things that really do matter from a customer experience perspective. And that gets in these ideas of connection. It gets in the idea of trust, and it gets into the idea of deliver. So I love that perspective. It's very much what we're thinking, and I'm excited to partner with you the rest of this year for some of those ideas and concepts to come to life. So thanks for joining us. It's always a pleasure to connect with you and for our audience to learn from you. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Brendan. Excited, and thank you for having me.
All right, I'll see you.